And we are back again like hacking, and on this, the 5th of the 9th, 2025, there are very many F1-centric news and update threads at which we need to put. Of course, it's race weekend. Of course, it's the Italian Grand Prix. And the Tifosi, therefore, are out in force, expectant of Scuderia Ferrari. Something that they haven't done season to date, hitherto, erstwhile, perform to their not insubstantial potential. We'll talk about that. Lewis Hamilton on the docket for the press conference has talked about him potentially being a sacrificial lamb given his 5-second or 5 grid place penalty on the back of what happened last week. We'll talk about that. Kim Illman has posted pictures of Christian Horner. Why is that important? Because the rumour per Joe Sayward is that Christian Horner will be joining Aston Martin and not Cadillac F1 next year. We'll talk about average sim pace during FP1 and FP2. So with 2, we'll talk about Kimi Antonelli and all the chaos. In addition, we'll talk about the legends of Liberty Media and potentially them selling the weird and wacky world, the entity that is the one that F's. Jomo, you're an absolute legend. T-double-M. Listen, we're back again like hacking, and the F1 beat never sleeps, and nor do we. Apparently, in the first instance, let me show you guys some pictures. I've got to get my George Russell on sometimes and do one of these. In fact, let's go to it. We'll talk about John Maloney. So here's your context chat. You remember a couple of years ago, the Saudis were stiffing around the F1 Liberty Media with a view to purchase and or acquire. Then the price tag was said to be something like 20 billion, at which point Mohammed Ben Sulayem, FIA president, overstepped his remit and said F1 is pricing themselves too high. What are you talking about, MBS? The commercial rights holder stuff, that should be beyond your remit, lest we forget that you signed a deal with the EU Commission saying as much, that in order to do your job properly, which is of course institute for the rules and regs in a way that's consistent and fair across all related parties, you needed therefore to be divorced from all things commercial. That was then. What's going on now? Well, MBS is trying to get himself into rallycross and all sorts of gubbins. Overstepping his remit is what he loves to do. But this time, chat, I think it might get a bit techie. This is why, if we're talking about acquisitions, you only need to look across to other sports spheres. Mention no names. Boxing, Crawford and Canelo is next week, right? September the 13th. Riyadh season. You see what's going on over that side of the world with comedy. Riyadh season. Comedians now. Dave Chappelle, Kevin Hart. That area of the world is taking over. Listen, take this one to the bank. I think if the likes of John Maloney are willing to sell F1, F1 as its ticker, then potentially there are sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East that will be listening to these words. And again, this is important for context. Greg Maffei, previous CEO of Liberty Media, before he handed back to John Maloney, he said once upon a time that before they were to sell, they would need to reorg the entities for tax purposes. Guess what's happened between now and then? They've done that. They've reorged all of the Ticketmaster and Live Nation stuff. That's been spun off with a view, therefore, to optimize for the structure in the instance, in case they want to spin off F1 from Liberty Media. And then John Maloney goes on a podcast and says the following. Roll the clip.
Formula One end up? I mean, is that going to be just streaming? Where do you see that going?
Well, I think the shareholders seem to love it right at the moment. Mm-hmm. It's really performing well. It has exceptionally good economic structure. It will be a very large free cash flow generator, which underwrites its high valuation. And there perhaps will be incremental synergistic add-ons. It still has a big brand to drive. Look, it's a public company. If somebody gets carried away and they want to buy it and they're willing to pay more for it than the board thinks that they can deliver to the shareholders, then we would sell it. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Formula One end up? I mean,
Did I just hear that right, chat? Did John Maloney say that he's willing to sell at the right price? Listen, they did brilliantly, did Liberty Media. Let me tell you how good they've done. Check out this, and I didn't even know this, chat. Even do my due diligence. Sometimes you learn new stuff. F1 is an entity, a listed entity. Its ticker symbol F1. You can see there it's listed on the Nasdaq. Who knew? Look at what they've done since 2024. Gangbuster settings, of course, at the altar of Drive to Survive 2021, the only international sport to still be putting on live events during COVID. Look what they've done. Chat, chaos scenes, gangbusters if ever I've seen it. Nvidia eats your heart out. Now their bloody market capitalization, being the number of shares times the share price, is circa 25 billion US dollars. 8 billion was what they acquired for. Now John Maloney, if indeed he wants to actualize some of that capital appreciation, then sold to the Saudis. I think this is a real thing, and I think we'll be discussing this in real time over the next couple of years, particularly if past this prologue, if you pay attention to what Turki Al Sheikh is doing as far as Riyadh season across the board, sporting spheres and comedy spheres, then this, ladies and gentlemen, is only a matter of time. If you forward forecast what F1 could do over the next 5 to 10 years, one might argue that 25 billion US dollars wise material capital appreciation for Liberty Media would be cheap. Oh, and by the way, apparently there's a race, isn't there, this week at Monza, the Italian Grand Prix. Let me talk about Sir Lewis Hamilton first. I was watching the press conference just now, and I don't know what to say. Okay, so in the first instance, we've got to address this 5-placed grid penalty for dicking around last Grand Prix. What? Bernie Ecclestone told you what you can't afford to do, F1, is have the fans go away and think the result is X, and then after the fact it turns out to be Y. Can't do that. The fans will lose faith. So why then, FIA, did Lewis get penalised post-race for something that happened on the formation lap? Why? Dutch Grand Prix was last weekend. What's that got to do with this? Why are the FIA so inept, so lacking in competence at each and every single juncture that they delay for these things? Surely you've got to institute for penalties in a way that's timely, match the cause, match the punishment with the action as far as the times when they happened. Something that I'm missing here, and Lewis is just like, I don't understand. I have no clue. Lewis is like, I eased off. I know it was yellows and pit lane, whatever. I understand. I eased off, but they were debating a difference in extent now and not kinds. The rule reads something like this, that it's got to be a substantial ease off. You've been karting before, guys and girls. You understand that you've got to make it clear to the stewards that you understand that you are racing under yellow flag. We used to do this one in karting and just go full beans, 100% throttle. Lewis eased off to the tune of 20 to 30%, and the stewards then said that wasn't good enough. Fair. If that's not good enough, then penalise him in the flipping race. Now we have Sir Lewis in his first maiden voyage, his Italian Grand Prix, and he's going to be 5. Even if he drops it on pole track, makes no odds, makes no difference. This is chaos. And then fast forward to today. I want to keep talking about Lewis, but I'll parlay into this. Then you see Charles Leclerc, and he's done one of these under red flag circumstances. Overtaken. Of course, the context is as follows. The red flag pops up on the right hand side of your screen only milliseconds before he's about to overtake. But yeah, and still the counter argument, surely, chat, is that rules are rules are rules, are they not? Or maybe I'm missing something here. You heard me at the outset say that the remit of the FIA, surely, unless I misread, unless I am an abbot of unreason, is to institute for the rules across the board, across all related parties, in a way that is true and fair every time. Tell me that that's what's happening there. I don't want to plead ignorance and perfect victimhood at the altar of Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton, but surely something's wrong there. If you're going to penalise him at the Dutch Grand Prix. It's as if they waited, knowing that the penalty wouldn't affect him because he DNF'd, that they wanted to penalise him at the Italian Grand Prix. What are they doing? Oh, and by the way, if we're talking Sir Lewis Hamilton, he said some interesting things at the presser. A couple of different things. They were talking about potentially him getting used as a sacrificial lamb. He was asked the question by an accredited journo, listen, mate, I know you got the 5-place grid penalty. Does that mean, therefore, that you would do like Ferrari used to do back in the day and allow Charles Leclerc through, going up through Lesmo 1 and 2? Would you allow Charles Leclerc to get the toe so that he can put it on pole? So Lewis goes, you know what, I don't know what they want to do. We haven't had the conversation yet. But would I, bearing in mind that even if I did put it on pole, I would not be on pole because of the FIA's ineptitude? Happily. Lewis said, yeah, just use me as a fact. If that's what they want to do, I don't know if that's the way that we're going, then I will be that sacrificial lamb. Bravo, Sir Lewis. And he looks well, doesn't he? See him in the blue. The blue suits him. He looks in an enhorabuena, in great form, does Sir Lewis. However, he was asked a question about his form, the pressure of the Tifosi, the underperformance, not in substantial year to date. And he says, listen, he just wants to focus on the here and now. He spoke about the Dutch Grand Prix rather eloquently. He was very stoic, I must say, about Sir Lewis. And he spoke about Niki Lauda. In the first instance, he talked about the Dutch Grand Prix and his terminology was weird. His verbiage nuanced. He said words to this effect: there was about 12 millimeters offline, put a couple of tyres on the white stuff and it was changeable conditions. So that sort of thing can happen and does happen, did happen at the Dutch Grand Prix. That's not to say, though, Lewis continued, that I make those mistakes routinely. Yeah, I'm 40-something points behind Charles Leclerc, but that's not due to mistakes nor errors of the unforced variety. I would contend, though, Sir Lewis, not to rain on a positivity Sir Lewis Hamilton parade. I would contend this. That concerns me most, that there haven't been mistakes, not a plethora of them at least, that it's just been materially slower than shot. Of course, the convergence is doing one of these if we're talking about qualifying pace, but you don't score any points on a Saturday. So Lewis Hamilton continues. He says of the Dutch Grand Prix mistake that he'd had a downgraded upshift and that locked the back. That happened a couple of free practices ago again, didn't it? What are they doing, Ferrari? I don't want to lose my mind here on the Friday show, chat. I desperately don't want to do it. But what are we doing here? That's twice that Sir Lewis, over the past couple of races, has fallen foul of a locking rear. What? SF25, for flip's sake, FFS, Frederick Vasseur, you got your contract extension now. Now it's time to show and build yourself a car in 2026, lest you wish to be called certified an abbot of F1 unreason. He talks as well about Niki Lauda. He was asked, interesting, because you know already that there's the big livery, the launch, the bloody celebration of Niki Lauda, legend of Scuderia Ferrari. You can see to the right hand side that Lewis Hamilton is paying homage to his friend and mentor, pseudo mentor, some say. When asked, however, about his decision to come across the Ferrari and how influential Niki Lauda's legacy was in that, Lewis Hamilton said this. He said, well, talking about Ferrari, I didn't even consider Niki, to be fair. I just wanted to drive for the red team with the red car and the yellow badge and the black prancing Corsa top. That was my wish. I've always wanted it since I was watching Michael Schumacher drive around 2000 to 2004. He said, Lewis's words, not mine. And then he expounds. He was asked a question about Niki Lauda's influence as far as him moving from McLaren way back in the day to Mercedes. And Lewis Hamilton says that, you know what, I'm going to be honest with you. I love myself some Niki Lauda. I'll never say anything against him. But what was instrumental, most instrumental in my moving from McLaren to Mercedes back in 13-14 was this: Ross Brawn. There was a conversation held between Lewis's mom, and Ross Brawn at Lewis's mom's house. He said Ross Brawn, in articulating the trajectory and what they're planning to do going forward, that was the conversation that was most influential in his moving, taking the biggest risk, one of the biggest risks in F1 ever taken, moving from McLaren to Mercedes. I thought that was fascinating, chat. Genuinely, I thought that was fascinating. And this is Lewis paying homage to one Niki Lauda. It's interesting, this. A lot of Ferrari fans are waxing lyrical about the livery, that they've nailed it. The Ferrari of yesteryear, 70s and early 80s. And I get it. I understand. But yet and still, all I'm invested in right about now, chat, is performance. It makes no odds if they go and drop the ball again. Lest we forget, around this fixture last year, Charles Leclerc nailed it, didn't he? At the altar of papaya rules or lack thereof. Here's hoping that maybe he can do it again. It would be brilliant. An Italian team winning the Italian Grand Prix. Charles Leclerc, the Monegasque, Lewis Hamilton helping with a cheeky toe to get the pole. A rising Scuderia Ferrari tide floats all F1 boats. And to that point, chat, let's have a look at the times, courtesy of our mates on F1 Reddit. For the avoidance of that, context is important here, right? Favourites, of course, it's going to be the McLaren body. You've seen how quick their car is. However, this isn't their natural habitat. Medium and low speed, or medium and high speed, they work well around, but particularly the medium speed. However, you open up the door for a cheeky Scuderia Ferrari or a Red Bull in the hands of Maximilian Verstappen or a Mercedes in the hands of George Russell, because it's high power stuff. Aerodynamic efficiency isn't front and centre of the mind as far as the challenges that are posed by the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. Ergo, let's have a look. So race sims only during free practice. Mediums, Lando Norris averages a startling, razor sharp, super quick, pant-wettingly so, 123.7 rounded up. Oscar Piastri hiding his track time light under a bushel, 124. Now, I'd argue, I spoke to Peter Windsor about this last time round, Monday of this week, and I'd argue that Oscar Piastri is doing the right thing in building over a weekend. What he doesn't want to do is shoot his load too early so that Lando's got some telemetry to go and study right. I think that's sensible from potentially the 2025 drivers champion elect. Charles Leclerc on softs, by the way, 123.7. So they're there or thereabouts. You know that Scuderia Ferrari will bring something here special, that they will have a bespoke rear wing with a view to now for the low downforce circumstance that is the Italian Grand Prix. George Russell on hards, 123.9. I think that bodes well for King George Russell and Mercedes. I think it bodes really well. Of course, their car is temperamental, a diva, and goes well in cooler climes. I'm not sure they'll get that at Monza, particularly during the race, but yet and still, 23.9 rounded bodes well. And then you've got Maximilian Verstappen on the mediums on a 123.8. Now, the differential between George and Max is pause for thought for Maximilian Verstappen fans, but yet and still, you bet your bottom dollar that Red Bull RB21, Pierre Vacher, will dial that car in between now and qualifying, at least more than it is dialed in now. So too, by the way, Kimi Antonelli, what are we doing, chat? He just needs to be back. He needs to get his way. He needs to get his mind back in the game. We've heard him talk ad infinitum about the chaos that is the pressure, that he's just graduated school. Like, he's young. Extend him some grace, therefore. But keep it on the island, chap. This time last year during FP1, he was blazing a trail on the soft compound tyres. Statement run, and then he yeets it into the barrier, going round parabolic. And now look, this is his home track, for Pete's sake. Do you know what I mean? There aren't too many drivers potentially on the grid who would have done more miles around this track than this youngster, Antonelli, and yet and still, he's in the bloody barrier. That, ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury, is not good enough. There are going to be questions asked of Kimi Antonelli. Now, listen, when there's no pressure, do you know what I mean? When you can jump in the car and there's not questions about your future and your tenure at the boys and girls from Brackley and Brixworth, it's all easy then. You're playing with house money. Now, however, George has put this chap in the pressure cooker, being because of the fact that he reckons he will be staying there for the long term. Imminently, there will be an announcement about George Russell's contract, rumoured to be a 2+1, 2-year contract with an additional year option depending on performance. George Russell has told us plain and simple, verbatim, it's not me. Maximilian Verstappen comes over here, I'm not going anywhere. It's Kimi Antonelli that they'll be getting rid of, particularly given his performance. His underperformance, not insubstantial underperformance, over the past couple of races, and I concur. The pressure cooker on Antonelli is only going to do one of these when we get the announcement in the next few days about George Russell's contract. It's going to get techie, chat. Really, really techie for Kimi Antonelli, and I don't envy him. He's only young. He's only young, isn't he? And that fills me with woe and dread for the chap. Oh, and by the way, I need to tell you about Danny Rick, because apparently Danny Rick, the legend that is, has done one of these. I'm actually retired. I thought he'd retired ages ago, Danny Rick. Do you know what I mean? How is this even news? You'd sacked it off ages ago, but he's given an announcement. He's put forth an announcement even confirming that he's officially retired from motor racing for good in an open letter to mark a new role as ambassador for Ford's racing division. And I've got to listen, I doff my cap to the fella. Do you know what I mean? He's been good. If we're talking about a rising F1 tide floating all F1 boats, then you've got to speak about Danny Rick's participation in Drive to Survive. So to Gunther Steiner when nobody else was keen. Here's his statement. While my racing days, quote, are behind me, my love for anything with wheels will always remain high, and for that I am proud to be partnering with Ford to become a global Ford racing ambassador. And it fits, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? Who better than to be a Ford ambassador than the honey badger smiler himself, the one that they call Danny Rick? I'm going to be working closely with Ford racing team and specifically focus on the amazing Raptor brand and lifestyle that Raptor has become for many of Ford's customers. So why now and why me? Well, when I decided it was time to retire, I thought long and hard about finding the most authentic way to stay connected to the world of motorsports. I mean, not to mention the monetization. Do you know what I mean? They're going to have to pay him a pretty penny, of course, for that. For me, racing was all about having fun. It made me happy and created memories that will last forever. Bless him. You know what I mean? I don't hate that from the one that they called that. I don't hate that at all. In fact, I love that for the chap. He's deserved it, hasn't he? Especially given what he's done for F1, giving it some much needed personality. A colourful character was Danny Rick, notwithstanding his inability to deliver on the promise over at the Racing Bulls. It's techie, this. It is techie. He's a Max the Ferrari, I heard. Jeez. So Max apparently didn't necessarily deny it out of hand when asked about potentially going over to Ferrari at some point in the not too distant. Listen, I tell you about Max. Here's what you need to know about Maximilian Verstappen. He'll go wherever has the best car, won't he? That's what Max Verstappen is looking to do. He wants to drive for the very best, knowing all the while that the next decision he makes as far as team is going to be important. There will be those who dine at the restaurant of statistical goatery. All they'll be concerned about is who has the most championships by frequency, as at the time of writing, it's Michael and it's Luce. And then there is everybody else. Fangio has 5. Them there too have 7. Beneath Fangio, you've got Alain Prost on 4. Et Al Niki, I want to say, has 4. So 2, Maximilian Verstappen has 4. So now this is the difference maker, isn't it? Maximilian Verstappen will be keen to expedite for his journey to the Mount Rushmore of F1 and be the difference, build a gap as far as GOAT settings between him and the rest. I think he'll want to go clear. And again, this is why you've got to wait around, right, and purvey the circumstance in 2027, or 26 even, to make a move then shortly thereafter in 2027. Oh, and by the way, got to talk about this because this is techie as far as Christian Horner is concerned. You'll be aware, last week there was a rumour, courtesy of Joe Saywood, that Christian Horner, that the next place you will see him on the F1 grid isn't Cadillac F1. The C-suite bods over there at Cadillac F1 have long come out and said that we're not interested in Christian Horner. We're not having those conversations with him, negotiating with that fella, nor do we intend to, categorically kiboshing any hopes that Christian had of being team principal come equity shareholder over at Cadillac F1, the 11th team, the 11th entrant in Formula 1. Even now, however, you get this. This is techie chat. This is very, 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 very techie. This is the picture that you need. So Kim Hillman, legendary F1 photographer, accredited bod, one of the go-tiest on F1 YouTube, of course, put this one out now. The context is, of course, this. Christian Horner in the midst of 2024. Allegations. I've got to be careful with my language here because there's stuff going on in the background that apparently nobody is allowed to talk about. Hypothetically, imagine if said accuser were to be pursuing actions through common law, through UK courts. Imagine then that Christian Horner made sure that all of the accredited journos in the UK were not allowed to talk about it. The guys and girls in the Netherlands have done, though. They've expanded upon it and they are saying more. However, in the UK, The rumour is that people are not allowed to talk about it. Mentioned no names Christian Horner. The context is this, of course. 2023, Christian Horner jumped off the plane and flew straight back to post the Brazil Grand Prix, flew straight out to Thailand to go and talk to Charlie Mavija, knowing all the while that these rumours were going to come out at some point, that there was going to be allegations of coercive conduct by dint of his PA, the PA that he shared with Adrian Newey. Adrian Newey said, you know what, I'm out. I can't be involved in this. I just want to build cars, read my book. I'm the last airbender. Give me a pen and a pad and I will build you the fastest F1 car in these rules and regs. I'm not concerned with the politicking. I'm gone. Jonathan Wheatley said the same thing. Rob Marshall said the same thing. There were a plethora of levers, Red Bull, God tier Red Bull Racing minds. He said, you know what, this is no longer Oracle Red Bull Racing that I signed up for. This has become Christian Horner Racing. There was rumour, of course, about Christian Horner leveraging British financiers with a view to spin off Red Bull Racing in his own image. He had aspirations of becoming the Toto Wolff of Red Bull, a team principal, therefore, come minority shareholder. He didn't get it across the line. There's politics. I won't even go into it, but you get the picture already. Oliver Mintzlaff, Dietrich Mateschitz didn't want it. Which way are we going here? Is this Christian Horner Racing or is this Red Bull Racing? And ultimately, Austria won over due to a couple of different things, not least of which were the material underperformance over the past 24 months of Christian Horner and Red Bull Racing. Ultimately, Christian Horner went away. There was chat about Christian Horner's PA, the accuser in this circumstance, coming back on the F1 grid by dint of a position at Cadillac F1. It was rumour though. It was rumour and speculation. Now though, via Kim Illman, and again, put together the dots. It's not explicitly said by Kim Illman over there on the Twitters. However, check out the picture. Now you're seeing Fiona for the first time. Put together the dots. Now, it's not necessarily, listen, correlation, dot causation. Sometimes the former does not imply the latter. Sometimes. Here, however, you read this out for yourself and understand that Cadillac F1 have just dismissed not long out of hand the possibility of Christian Horner joining them. Here's what Kim Illman says, legendary F1 photographer. And again, I didn't want to put this up, but I understand that Kim Illman wouldn't have put it. Think about who Kim Illman is in the way that he conducts his activity. He operates on reputation, right? There's no way that he would have put this up there with that information had Fiona, the rumoured accuser, allegedly not giving him permission to. This is what Kim Illman says, and this is techier than techie things, chat. Cadillac CEO Dan Tauris has arrived at the paddock with his wife Cassidy on the right and his executive assistant Fiona Hewitson. Fiona has been out of the sport for 1 year now, having previously worked as ex-Red Bull team principal Christian Horner. Well, there we go. He's told it, hasn't he? He's spilled all the beans as Christian Horner. Now, not as Kim Illman. And I don't know how I feel about it. Here's the way that I will spin this chat, because this is important. I feel like this is a positive news story, not for Horner, of course. He'll be looking at this and he'll be seething. Of course, he'll be fuming. He won't want to do this. He won't want... I mean, worst nightmare for Christian Horner that the accuser's on the grid, back on the grid before he is. I'd argue that she's won in this sense. Of course, she'll be pursuing things behind the scenes, potentially in the UK courts, if she's still dissatisfied with the verdict of Red Bull Racing. Lest we forget they're a private entity. King's Counsel settings was the independent investigator, but the King Counsel too of Charlie Mavija, the 51% owner, who at the time saw Christian Horner as an adopted son. Can you say subjectivity, objectivity, or lack thereof? Allegedly. And that's where it gets techie for Fiona. I think this is a good news story. Back on the grid, unencumbered, of course, especially if those accusations. Imagine in a world where they were true. She loves F1, eh? Do you know what I mean? Some people give their life to it. And why should she be disadvantaged because Christian Horner X, Y, and Z. It's techier than techie things, this. Modern day, John. Oracle is CIA. I wonder which CIA to behave yourself, Space goes. Shrek is going to be. Michael says, how has Horner not been on the Sky Sports broadcast? Think he's above it. I think he's taking some time away for now. Still gardening leave, if rumours to be believed. And then once he's severed all contractual ties with Oracle Red Bull Racing, then I think you'll see him again. Kim isn't going to do it with that. 100% not, Benzie. There's no way that Kim Illman would publish that without the prior consent of Fiona, the former assistant of Christian Horner. Not that picture and not them words either. Fiona looks like... I'll behave yourself, Benzie. I can't read that. Joe, you're a legend, a proper legend. Not going to lie, this looks fishy. Was she a honey? Do you think so, Neil? Listen, I'm not close enough to the circumstance to speculate, and because the allegations are so heinous and serious, it would be disingenuous of me. It would be poor form of me to speculate the veracity of the accusations. The only two people that know how true or false they are the accuser and the accused. That's the truth of it, Neil. Horndog had solid theory, Neil. Dressing that like a professional setting. It's techie. I couldn't. You guys can if you want to, but it would be disingenuous of me to listen. Back in a couple of hours, or this time. Well, not this time tomorrow. Your boy's far too rusty with it. Get your eye into the game, Cameron. Back tomorrow, of course, for quali. I'll be back 30 minutes before then for the stream. Back 30 minutes before FP3. Normal scheduling has resumed. Back again like Hakkinen. It had to be done, chat. I apologise for going away for a couple of days. But sadly, team principal of Cameron GP mandated that we do it. But again, we're going hard. Normal scheduling has been resumed. 2 a days streaming. If there is a car out on track, we'll be here talking about it streaming between now and next time. 30 minutes before FP3 tomorrow, 30 minutes before qualifying, normal reaction videos even, and normal news pieces, because the F1 beat doesn't sleep. If not us, then who? Needs covering, chat. There are too many things about which we need to talk. Far too many things. F1 narrative that we need, demand unpacking. Between now and next time, the prosecution rests no further questions. You're